You know that expression, going through hell and back? Been there. In fact, when I was going through the worst of it, Winston Churchill's quote, "When you're traveling through hell, keep moving," became a daily, sometimes an hourly mantra. When I came out the other side, I felt committed to understanding what went wrong and how to help other people avoid that nightmare. But I fear I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the stage with the person I used to be, the type A+ personality. Perhaps you know somebody like this, an overachiever with a great job or grades, lots of hobbies or extracurricular activities, a hyperactive social life. From an early age, I equated achievement with love, so I shifted into hyperachievement drive and just got stuck there, literally. And every time I achieved a goal, I set the bar even higher. I moved to Washington, D.C. after college and worked for Senator Ted Kennedy on the Health and Human Resources Committee. When I mastered that, I decided to try my hand at journalism and broke big stories that got picked up by the Washington Post and USA Today. Living in DC was definitely intense and competitive, but I still craved more intensity. So I moved to New York to attend Columbia University for my MBA. While there, I decided that running 3 to 5 miles a day for fun no longer cut it. I needed to focus my athletic efforts towards a goal, like a 26.2-mile marathon. So I signed myself up for running classes and dutifully trained with the intention of just finishing the New York Marathon. But you know what happened the day after I finished my first marathon? Can you guess? I decided I wanted to do it again and get a better time. Intense, right? But perhaps slightly familiar as well. Hard driving, focused, no problem you can't solve type of personality. Perhaps you know somebody like this. Or perhaps you sense a bit of it in yourself. I really thought I was invincible. I hadn't yet encountered a challenge I couldn't overcome. And I assumed that my life would continue on that trajectory. And it did, for a while, until it didn't. Until somebody that I love suffered from a severe, debilitating depression. And I tried to help, to fix them, to be their rock, their port in the storm. I was young, I was naive, and I was in love. And I believed that I was invincible and love could conquer all. So I worked harder and harder, taking on more and more tasks for them, hoping that my strength was strong enough for the both of us, and I could help them heal by example. But a funny thing happened. My strength did not make them better. It made them worse. The more I stepped in to help by taking over tasks that they found too hard, the more they retreated. If you think about letting your two hands gently rest together, applying equal pressure to both of them, it's very balanced and even, right? But the moment one hand starts to push a little harder, taking on more and more space, the only thing the other hand can do is retreat. And that is exactly what happened in this relationship. In my effort to help, which was truly driven by my love and my type A belief that I could fix anything, the person I was trying to help got worse and worse until finally, as I told our children, they landed in a residential treatment facility where trained professionals could help them combat their own depression. And here is where my story gets interesting. The same day that this person that I love so deeply was moved to a place where I knew they were safe and I knew it was no longer my job to keep them safe, I completely fell apart. The bottom literally dropped out from under me. I could barely get out of bed to make my kids breakfast, pack their lunches, or drive them to school. The minute I dropped them off, all I wanted to do was climb back into bed and binge watch the Kardashians or some other mindless television. Answering the phone felt like too much. Getting out the door to exercise, so not gonna happen. The dishes could sit. The laundry, forget it. Trying to get any work done suddenly felt too hard. Even taking a shower required energy I wasn't sure I could expend. I had never felt so exhausted or defeated. This really was not the person I was used to being. What had happened to me? How did I go from invincible to exhausted? So in my former life, I worked as a researcher and a journalist, and I put on my investigative cap and started to explore what had led to my collapse. What I discovered was equal parts fascinating and deeply troubling. It turns out that years of chronic and prolonged stress can really deplete the body. You see, the body and its stress response are designed to be short and acute, like the experience of running from a predator. You know the feeling, like when the car on the freeway next to you suddenly starts to veer in your lane, totally not realizing they're about to crash right into you. Your heart begins to beat faster, your senses heighten, your vision improves, your energy gets a boost, any aches or pains lessen so you can really focus on the task at hand, staying alive. This first line of defense against stress is known as your sympathetic fight or flight response of the nervous system. Your body kicks into survival mode. It releases hormones like adrenaline that make your heart beat faster. Your blood pressure and breathing increase to help transport nutrients and oxygen to the cells faster. Your pupils dilate so you can see more clearly, and your blood pumps to the external muscles so you can flee faster. This also routes the blood flow away from the internal organs of digestion, which basically turns off your digestive process. It also shuts down all functions that are not necessary to survival, like reproduction, rational thinking. It's actually a helpful tip to know. If you're trying to communicate with somebody and it isn't going well, notice if their pupils are dilated. It's a really big clue that they're locked in that sympathetic state and they're not going to be able to engage in a rational way. But the key point is that we are designed to kind of switch into this sympathetic state, flee from danger, and then drop back into the parasympathetic rest and digest state of balance, which is known as homeostasis. It's only in this parasympathetic state that the body can really rest, digest, and heal. Which makes sense, right? I mean, if the lion is chasing you, all functions that are not essential to your immediate survival shut down, including your immune system and your inflammatory response. Guess what I was doing to myself for all those years when I was living under the intense stress of constant deadlines, achievements, and intense physical and emotional challenges? I was creating chronic and prolonged stress in my body. Sadly, this experience is not unique to me. More than 40% of all adults say they lie awake at night because of stress, according to the Journal of Psychosomatic Research. Even the Mayo Clinic links chronic stress with health concerns like anxiety, depression, heart disease, digestive challenges, and cognitive impairment. It's interesting that most of our modern day stress is not acute or short term. I guess we're lucky that way, right? We've evolved past being chased by lions. But I fear we might have evolved into something worse. The chronic and prolonged stress we experience in school, in our jobs, relationship, traffic, heck, even just watching the election returns or a scary movie can trigger a stress response. And it doesn't stop there. A stressor is technically defined as anything that can knock us out of balance. It can be physical, emotional, or physiological. Most of us are pretty aware of external stressors like a conflict with another person, financial stress, bad traffic, having a challenging child. Okay, those are some of mine. But we may not be aware of internal stressors from thought patterns related to emotions like fear, worry, anger, grief, recalling a past trauma, or even excessive ambition and perfectionism. Grief in particular can really tax the body. This is one of the reasons that people so often die shortly after the passing of a partner. And it's important to understand that the body cannot differentiate between actual physical stress and emotional or anticipatory stress, like thinking about a catastrophe that might occur in some imaginary future or reliving a traumatic experience from the past. The book, Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, talks about this phenomenon, noting that sometimes we're smart enough to see things coming and based only on that anticipation, turn on a stress response as robust as if the event had actually occurred. I really want to land on this point because it's definitely something that I got wrong. I always assumed that stress was related to external stresses like deadlines or financial pressures. It honestly never occurred to me that all the time I spent worrying about a loved one would kick my body into a stress response. I also didn't really understand what that meant for my body. So here's the deal. When stress is more chronic and prolonged, two things happen. First, we stay locked in the sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response, kind of like never turning off the light. This happens when we push too hard or worry too much without enough downtime for recovery between responses. So our sympathetic system gets stuck in that on position, which keeps our parasympathetic rest and digest response stuck in the off position. This is really important to understand. Your body needs to exit out of the sympathetic mode in order to be able to enter into the parasympathetic mode. So when we're stuck in sympathetic, we never get to drop into that parasympathetic state, which is critical for allowing the body to rest, repair, and heal. The second thing that happens is all the stress hormones that our body releases also get stuck in that on position. So for example, when we're in stress, the brain triggers the adrenal glands to release hormones like cortisol that help us access instant energy. Cortisol also turns off any systems that get in the way of a rapid response, like inflammation. If your ankle is swollen, it's going to be hard to run from a predator. So cortisol turns off inflammation. That's why that medication cortisone works so well to reduce inflammation. The other system that gets turned off is the immune system. Are you tracking me? Well, it totally makes sense to downregulate inflammation in the immune system during a life-threatening emergency. It's not necessarily a good thing to get permanently stuck in that mode, right? Inflammation is the body's attempt at self-protection. It causes tissues to swell up, creates heat, and causes nearby muscles to contract to isolate whatever is happening in the body so it doesn't spread throughout the whole body. The immune system plays a similar role, isolating and attacking any foreign or harmful substances to protect the body. When these two defense mechanisms are turned off for extended periods of time, it leaves us vulnerable to health issues that we might not even see coming, like my depression, or in some cases heart disease, autoimmunity, and even cancer. I find it a little alarming, for example, that a heart attack is often the first symptom of cardiac problems, right? Unfortunately, when we are stuck in the sympathetic fight or flight mode, our bodies can't reboot and heal. Even race cars need to make pit stops along the way to prevent their tires from blowing out, right? But so many of us forget to make those small pit stops, those pauses to allow our bodies to rest and repair. And when it can't, over time, chronic stress depletes our reserves of nutrients and hormones, much like deficit spending. At a certain point, this can catch up to you, as it did with me, leading to exhaustion, depression, autoimmunity, or heart attacks. You might have heard that stress is called the silent killer because there are often no symptoms until an issue occurs. So, how do you prevent the risk of poor health or even death with no visible symptoms? When I was in the midst of my own private hell, I was often told that I just needed to relax or reduce my stress load. If we're being totally honest, I actually find it really stressful to hear that I just need to reduce my stress load. I mean, really, as much as I would love to spend my limited free time during the day napping, reading for pleasure, or lounging at a spa, I still need to get things done. For example, my kids still get hungry 3 times a day. It's kind of like clockwork. And if there isn't food in the house because I haven't made it to the store or bothered to prepare it for them, it will likely add to my stress. So I really struggled when at the height of my depression, I was encouraged to just relax. I was certainly getting good sleep. It was one of my favorite hobbies at the time. I was also trying to meditate, trying being the optimal word, and going to yoga when I could muster the energy to get out the door. But that alone wasn't helping. I had been deficit spending with my stress reserves for so long that my body needed a serious reboot to return to balance. You know how when your phone or computer starts malfunctioning, you can simply restart it and it seems to work perfectly, which is a really good thing because it is my one and only technology hack, but it seems to solve everything with my phone. Don't you wish you could be that easy with our bodies, that we could just reboot our systems and reset our stress levels? Well, it actually kind of is. It has to do with a technique for hacking the parasympathetic state. That's right. Just like you can reboot your phone or your computer, you can reboot your body by manually overriding the on-off switch between the sympathetic fight or flight state and the parasympathetic rest and digest state of the nervous system. That's right, you heard me correctly. The body has a reboot button, just like your phone. And it's located at the vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10. That's vagus, V-A-G-U-S. Not the city in Nevada that's known for showgirls and gambling, but similar exciting in terms of the upside it prevents. The vagus nerve is one of 2 extremely long cranial nerves that start at the brainstem, right at the back of the head, and travel down the neck on both sides of the body near the carotid artery and the jugular vein, and extend through the abdomen, triggering the parasympathetic response in every organ of digestion. Neurologists in the 19th century began noting that applying pressure on the carotid artery in the neck, right near the vagus nerve, could stop seizures. That prompted significant research trials to manually stimulate the vagus nerve with electrical impulses sent through a device that is surgically implanted under the skin of the chest, similar to a pacemaker. When activated, the device sends electrical signals along the vagus nerve to the brainstem, which then sends signals to certain areas in the brain. Vagus nerve stimulation has been used to treat epilepsy, depression, multiple sclerosis, migraines, and Alzheimer's disease. The Food and Drug Administration has even officially approved vagus nerve stimulation for epilepsy and depression. So, while the benefits of this surgical procedure are exciting, the potential to stimulate the vagus nerve through non-invasive methods are equally compelling. There are several ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, including mindful breathing, gargling, using a tongue depressor to stimulate a gag reflex, or applying freezing cold water to the face and neck. Like surgery, these techniques felt a little intense to me, so instead I chose to apply a stimulatory blend of essential oils to the point where the vagus nerve is most accessible to the surface of the skin, right behind the earlobe on the mastoid bone. The skin is relatively permeable to small molecules of fat-soluble substances like essential oils. This means that stimulatory essential oils are easily absorbed through the skin and can be used much like an electrical impulse to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system to the rest and digest response. Shifting back into the parasympathetic state allows healing and regeneration to occur. It was by far the most powerful tool I used in my recovery from depression. It's also a really easy and convenient hack to reset your body so you can perform all the parasympathetic activities like digesting, detoxifying, lowering blood pressure, and building immunity. And it's a great practice before meals as it turns on your body's ability to digest, absorb, and assimilate your nutrients. So we all have our would've, could've, should'ves in life, and unfortunately no one escapes. But I really wish I would have known in my 20s that reducing your stress does not need to be so stressful. It can be as simple as rebooting your phone or brushing your teeth. Easy, simple, daily hygiene routines to prevent bigger problems from developing later. What I want for you is to take time to reboot your body's operating system every day. Ideally several times a day. You can use whatever tool speaks to you: deep breathing, meditation, gargling, freezing water, or my favorite trick, applying a stimulatory essential oil right here, behind the earlobe on the mastoid bone, where the vagus nerve is most accessible to the surface of the skin. This daily ritual was one of my key tools that I employed on my road to recovery, and it is my sincere hope that by sharing it with you, you can now reduce or completely avoid your own journey through hell and back.